Good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday.
We got a big show today. I'm pretty excited. So we've got Nina Turner from the Bernie Sanders campaign. She's going to preview his big speech on Medicare for All. And this is interesting. We did a segment with David Sirota, also from the Sanders campaign, and he called Third Way corporatist. They did not like that, so we're having someone from Third Way on today to tell us why they are not corporatist. All that and so much more coming up today on Rising.
Good morning, everybody. Krystal, what's on your radar?
So the president's making some interesting moves here. While he was pouring gasoline on the fires of race in this nation, his administration was making moves that could have profound consequences both here and abroad. We're learning now that the Trump administration is taking money that was originally intended as aid for the violent and impoverished Northern Triangle countries that so many migrants are fleeing from. They're taking that aid and they're repurposing it to fund regime change in Venezuela. So according to a memo that was obtained by the LA Times, the money will go to the dissident government of Juan Guaido in order to fund salaries, airfare, good governance training, propaganda, technical assistance for holding elections, and other, quote, democracy building projects. So again, money intended for humanitarian aid is being funneled into regime change in the oil-rich nation of Venezuela. Now look, no one is saying that the Maduro regime should be supported. On the contrary, Maduro's mismanagement has caused his people extreme misery. But this is a terrible idea. American dollars being used to pay the salaries of a dissident government in Latin America, nonetheless? Have we learned absolutely nothing from our legacy of imperialist intervention in Latin America or around the world? And obviously, this move exposes the lie that the Trump admin would actually like to stop refugees from coming to our southern border, since they're literally shifting funds from the type of humanitarian aid that could keep migrants at home to a regime change scheme that could very well send more refugees fleeing their country. And don't let anyone try to pretend that the administration's support here of Venezuela's dissident government is about the poor children. First of all, the sanctions that we have imposed on Venezuela have made that suffering much worse. According to the New York Times, our involvement has helped make the Venezuelan collapse worse than the fall of the Soviet Union, Zimbabwe under Mugabe, or any other economic destruction outside of war. Second, and this part is truly unbelievable, so in spite of the fact that we are helping to cause a massive refugee crisis in Venezuela, and in spite of the fact that the administration publicly feigns deep concern about the grave conditions on the ground, they have refused to grant temporary protected status to Venezuelan refugees here in the U.S. So that means that we will continue deporting Venezuelans back to a country in such dire straits that butchers have literally stopped selling meat in favor of entrails, fat shavings, and cow hooves. Again, Maduro is terrible. No one is defending him. But let's be real about the regime change project that the Trump administration is engaged in here. It is not about humanitarianism. It's about cheap talking points about the evils of socialism so that people associate it with Venezuelan collapse rather than Scandinavian prosperity. It's about shoring up votes with Cuban voters in Florida. And it seems rather curious that whenever we seem to take a keen interest in the internal government affairs of foreign countries, those countries invariably seem to have vast oil reserves. Iraq, Libya, Venezuela as examples. Curious pattern there. Congress can still put a hold on the funds, though Trump could override that hold. At the very least, the public needs to know exactly where their dollars are going and why. Sagar, on every level, this seems to me like a terrible idea. One expert from the Wilson Center told the LA Times the worst thing that could happen for Guaido is for his administration to be seen as basically bought and paid for by the U.S.
Yeah, the Guaido transition, or whatever you want to call it, in Venezuela has been a complete disaster. He's never been seen as totally legitimate by the Venezuelan people. It is a society in complete and free fall collapse. And you're right. I mean, the hubris to think that we can just go and fund and basically just prop up a government with international recognition.
Salaries.
It's ridiculous. I couldn't agree more with you. I have no problem actually trying to install a government that is favorable to us, but doing it in such a haphazard and terrible way just shows that this is really, really hard. When Maduro has a monopoly on the use of force, it's not going to go away anytime soon. The likelihood is that if it were going to happen, it's going to be really bloody money. The U.S. doesn't want that on their hands. That would be the worst thing for the domestic populace.
Exactly. And I think it's insane that while things are in such free fall, total collapse, I mean, the conditions are horrific. Hospitals there are no patients because they have nothing they can do. I mean, people literally dying for lack of food and basic health care. And yet we're not going to grant refugees temporary protected status, even as their rhetoric is reflecting reality that there's a total free fall here.
I feel for them, but TPS is a problem that we've gone down that road before. El Salvador earthquake and many others in 1985, all of them are still here. None of them ever actually went back. TPS in effect means an amnesty or the granting of citizenship or legal permanent status to tens of thousands of people. And that's a political discussion that we need to have before we just, throw it around willy-nilly. But I agree. I mean, these people need to be helped. And a lot of this is at the expense of our own meddling in Venezuela, as long as Hugo Chavez and a lot of that. So it's a complicated conversation.
Yeah, and our sanctions making things worse as we speak, by the way.